From the WATE.com Digital Center, answering your legal questions. This is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
And welcome to Ask Isaacs. I'm Don Hudson along with Greg Isaacs, and we're discussing today the Sean Williams case, recently sentenced to 95 years. There are all kinds of charges. I mean, in this particular case, the two things that he got convicted of are child porn and the attempt to escape, right? That's it for just this.
He was sentenced, Don. There's a flurry of charges that he was convicted of that are pending in different jurisdictions.
Right.
The federal court.
So we only got 95 years on just basically
at the beginning.
Just the few that we've looked at, and he's got a whole long list behind him.
And that was a two-count indictment that had charges of enticing minors to engage in distribution of child pornography. But the backstory, Don, is phenomenal. Yeah. Sean Williams was a respected business person in Johnson City. He had a downtown condo / loft, and for years had parties, was known in the community. But while he had this public facade of normalcy and success, he was a serial rapist, someone that created and distributed child pornography. Judge Ronnie Greer, the federal judge in Greenville, when he was sentenced to 95 years, characterized Sean Williams as a psychopath, a sociopath, and a pedophile, and said that other than a serial killer, he could not think of anything that was more despicable.
You've been in the court countless times. Is that unusual, or maybe par for the course for a judge to say, you know, I've got something to say before we let you go?
Right. The U.S. Attorney's Office asked for the max, and Judge Greer did. And, you know, you get extreme reactions when you have extreme facts. Sources tell me that this is how prolific he is. At the end of the day, if you count the federal cases, the parallel state cases in the Western District of North Carolina, he will have, when all is said and done, raped 72 women and 3 children.
And I'll get into those charges and the levels, the federal, state, and that. But I do want to go back to the judge's comments. Is that? You've been in court. Is that normal when a judge is just like, I'm just as angry as the victims here, and I want to say something?
The one case, the one scenario where you see that more often than not is cases involving child pornography, whether it's possession, whether it's production. And I think what happened in that courtroom, they played actually some of the videos, some of the photographs of people being drugged, raped, molested, and you know that visceral effect. You saw Judge Greer, and typically federal judges, Don, back to your question, are very measured. Sentences are governed by the federal sentencing guidelines, but it was no holds barred. But it didn't only work one way. Sean Williams was equally disrespectful, equally outrageous in his comments, alleging that this was a setup, follow the money. So a really acrimonious, emotional, electrifying afternoon in that courtroom. And at the end of the day, Judge Greer, who said, I very rarely impose what is in essence a life sentence, did so.
Right. And going back, just so people know, like you said, he was a businessman in Johnson City. At one point, apparently, he'd fallen asleep on a college campus on Western Carolina University. That's where police found him. And that's where he had a large amount of meth and cocaine, according to authorities, and the taped sexual assaults that you're talking about, child pornography, which kicked everything off into this. But in reality, it didn't really kick everything off, because before this, there were women that had accused him of sexual assault, correct?
There were, and basically, we say sometimes there are 2 parallel trains. In this case, there are 3 parallel trains. And that was the first arrest in the Western District of North Carolina on a college campus. And this is how much impunity this individual had. They found videos when they searched his car of rapes, child pornography. Then when they subsequently searched his house, he had files labeled rape.
Rape, right.
Yeah, it was
like
remarkable.
23 victims or something like
But
that.
but okay, so that's the first thing that put him on the radar, the arrest in North Carolina. But in the interim, there had been complaint after complaint after complaint in Johnson City. There was a whistleblower lawsuit where a former AUSA, Assistant U.S. Attorney, said that she kept trying to investigate Sean Williams, and she was rebuffed by the Johnson City Police Department. At one stage, the Johnson City Police Department raided Williams' house, took $500,000, returned $81,000, and
so you wonder
didn't
where the
account
other
for the
400 and something.
yeah, 419,000. But in the interim, they kept the 419,000, and they let Sean Williams walk time and time again. Very unfortunately, there was a sealed indictment. Now, Don, indictments and charging instruments, when they're returned by the grand jury, they're not a public record until someone is arrested, whatever. In this case, the Johnson City Police Department tipped off Williams, and before he could be arrested, he fled. So you had a nationwide manhunt. So now you also have additional state charges based on some of the evidence that came out in federal court. Attorney General Steve Finney from Washington County indicated that after the federal lawsuits have been concluded, he intends to very vigorously prosecute Sean Williams. And again, at the end of the day, 72 rapes.
And I know that their Johnson City has this settlement with some of these victims. It's a $28 million settlement brought by a group of women, but it still has not. It still has to be approved, I guess.
It has to be approved by the federal court. But when you think about settlement numbers, typically mirror the culpability of the tortfeasor or the culpability of the defendant. Think about this. The largest settlement in Johnson City history, $28 million for covering up and not investigating the serial rapes by Sean Williams.
I'm curious because he's, based on the sentence, he's going to die in prison. I mean, he's not, 95 years. Going forward with these other cases, what does that mean for the victims to say, hey, I know, yes, that, but I want to see him convicted of what he did to me?
Well, victims have, rights. And, in Tennessee, under the Victims' Rights Act, which is a part of our Constitution, you have a right to be informed, to be heard. So, I think what law enforcement's doing is giving these victims closure. And the other thing, if you look at it from the big picture from Google Earth, okay, this is a tremendous sentence, 95 years. Why are we going to the Western District of North Carolina on the drug child pornography case? Why is Steve Finney waiting to charge him with rape after rape after rape? Because you never know. The Court of Appeals could overturn part or all of a conviction. So basically, you want to prosecute Sean Williams to the fullest extent of the law. As much as he was a serial rapist, you want to be a serial prosecutor. And if you're on the side of truth and justice, load that person up. But really remarkable when you have, Don, and I've done this over 35 years, when you have an overarching conspiracy with law enforcement to prolifically cover up and failing to investigate rape after rape after rape.
What do you see happening there? I mean, they've got this settlement. Is that the end of it for that police department, or is there going to be the federal government's going to come in and?
They have done a lot of remedial work. They have a lot of training, a lot of programs, a lot of people moving around. They've been moved around. Not a lot of people not there. So there has been a lot of response to what has happened. But this situation is going to go on. And let me tell you how prolific in terms of Sean Williams' criminal conduct. When he was being transported in the back of a federal van, he somehow was able to kick out the back window, loosen his shackles, and be on the run for about 30 days until he was arrested in Pinellas, Florida. So really remarkable the extent of his criminal conduct, and I think that's why you saw Judge Ronnie Greer call him a despicable sociopath, psychopath, pedophile.
Did he? I'm trying to remember. Did he try to represent himself
I
at the
think
beginning, or is he just?
he went through a number of lawyers, and I think Mark Brown was his lawyer in this case in federal court. But it's interesting, and as the sentences pile up, the cases pile up. Sean Williams continues to be intransient. He tends to be very disrespectful to the judicial system, to victims. So I think this case, as it proceeds, is going to be as tumultuous, and it's going to follow the acrimony and vitriol is going to follow Sean Williams from court to court to court.
And because to talk about that a little bit, the tentacles go state, local, federal, and how do they work all that out?
Let's talk about this. So you have two parallel criminal prosecutions, one in Greenville, Tennessee, and the Eastern District of Tennessee, one that's pending in the Western District of North Carolina. But most people aren't aware, you can then, under the doctrine of separate sovereigns, prosecute someone for the very same factual conduct in the state forum. So the feds can prosecute you for something, and the state can prosecute you for the exact same thing, and it's not double jeopardy under the doctrine of separate sovereigns.
So he could be getting the same. Will they be able to use some of that? They'll just use some of that same evidence, I would assume, if you're going after the same charges.
They will, and it's like I said, you're going to see these prosecutors, aggressively go after him and get a sentence that's going to be not 95 years, but hundreds of years, dozens of decades to ensure that he never gets out of jail again.
So how does this all play out in the future? Is this something we're looking at years and years for this to play out, or will they try to expedite this and get it going and get it done?
Well, it'll take a considerable amount of time, because the next thing that's going to happen is the federal case in the Western District of North Carolina will either proceed to trial, be concluded. After that, then it's going to go back to state court in Johnson City. So typically what you're seeing happening here happens all over the state of Tennessee. The state prosecutors defer to the feds. Right. And so they're going to let
We've
them
seen
conclude.
enough TV movies to see that, right?
We saw how that ends on Law and Order.
Right.
And then the state prosecutors are going to then pick up, and it'll be easier. We saw that sometimes in the Chipman Street murders. There was some federal prosecutions, some state prosecutions for the same conduct, but the local district attorney, Steve Finney, is going to have the benefit of all the work product from the federal agencies in North Carolina, federal agencies there in Greenville, and I venture to say that they're going to be very cooperative as they work together to try to stack up time on Sean Williams.
How do we? Because we talk about Sean Williams, and he is he's clearly found guilty of these horrific crimes. How do we make sure that we remember the victims here, and so that they are the actual people that win when he loses?
Well, there are two ways. One is with you take someone's freedom in a criminal prosecution, right, which with 95 years, and the other way is civilly. In our system of justice, typically that's how you do it. There is going to be $28 million that is going to be distributed to the victims in this case. But it's interesting. A lot of times victims show up for sentencing hearings and they want closure, or they want someone to say, I'm sorry, right, or here's how it happened. Let me put my behavior in context. And they got the exact opposite, right, from Sean Williams. He said, follow the money, and he's saying this was all a financial setup. But then again,
24 victims that are adults, and then all the videos.
Don, at the end of the day, 72 separate rapes, separate victims, drugged and sexually assaulted. And you did not have to be Sherlock Holmes or a special sexual assault task force to investigate and charge Sean Williams. He literally had videos categorized and labeled rape in his apartment. And remarkably, part of the $28 million civil suit, that evidence was overlooked by Johnson City at the beginning of this saga.
We could spend another 15 minutes just talking about the police department and how it handled all this, but we are going to wrap things up. Greg, thank you very much, and thank you very much for watching. And catch Greg also at 5 o'clock, around 5:30, 5:40 tonight on WATE as well.